A historic conviction. For the first time, a former US president is found guilty of felony crimes after attempting to cover up a hush money payment ahead of the 2016 presidential election.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace.
Our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years, and it literally is the cornerstone of America.
The United States remains divided on the jury's decision.
I'm thoroughly outraged. He's always had my back, and they convicted an innocent man today.
So what's next for Donald Trump and for US politics at large? Find out during our special, Trump's guilty verdict, the fallout.
Welcome to our special coverage on CGTN. I'm Jiao Yang. A conviction at a New York courthouse has stirred new rounds of chaos for the U.S. political landscape. Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican Party candidate, has become the first former U.S. president in history to be convicted of felony crimes. A New York jury found Trump guilty of falsifying business records to illegally influence the 2016 election through hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. And Trump survived 2 impeachments during his tenure. He now also faces 3 other felony indictments, which add to the uncertainty to his quest for the White House. Now, for more on Trump's conviction and its political implications, we'll be talking to our reporter and expert panel. Our reporter Edith Tianshan is standing by in Los Angeles. Einar Tangen is here in our Beijing studio. He's a senior fellow at the Taihe Institute. We have Joseph Gregory Mahoney, professor of politics at East China Normal University, joining us from Shanghai, and political analyst Jaden Horan in Miami. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Thank you all. We'd like to go to Edith first. Edith, bring us up to date on the latest developments since Trump's conviction.
Well, Jiayong, here it seems, business as usual, at least for Donald Trump himself, after becoming the first former American president who is, convicted of criminal charges on all 34 counts. Just a week after, he is still back on the campaign trail. This time in Arizona on Thursday, he essentially, is a sign that there is no slowing down in the election campaign. If anything, everything seems a little bit more energized. We know that, his campaign is attracting more money from his donors. His support base is ever more frustrated on this outcome, and they seem ever more energized. So we saw one of those very typical mega rallies, the so-called mega rallies. They're always, loud music, a lot of chanting. As energized as always, he had no problems drawing thousands of people to these rallies. And so it was business as usual, I say. But of course, he did, the majority of the speech was about, immigration and the economy, the inflation. He, of course, heavily criticizes Joe Biden as always. But there was a brief mention of the court case where he, maintained that very defined attitude which he has established from the very first day of this court, and the same response, he's given a day after the verdict. He still continues to say this is a rigged court. He's calling it a fake, and every time he's using these slogans, these chants, you can see these crowds cheering after him. There was, though, one important announcement during the speech, and he did say that he wanted the conviction to be overturned in an appeal. So we do understand that on one hand, he is dismissive of this court. He's criticizing it. He's calling it politically motivated. But on the other, it does seem that he and his team does take it seriously, and they do want to follow, due diligence, legally speaking. They do want to go after these charges and try to overturn it. Of course, time frame is completely unclear. We don't know how long it would take for this appeal process to be resolved, but we do know that he still has 3 more important legal cases he's involved with, but none of them will be resolved before that election date. Zhao Yang?
And what have been some of the reactions to this court verdict?
Well, pretty much as about everything else, for this particular case, the American society is also very polarized. Just the way, people here, most of the people, the great majority, they either love Trump or hate Trump. And the majority of the reactions are along those sides. I mean, mind you, the interviews we've done were mostly, all of them pretty much were in Los Angeles. And this is a very democratically leaning city, the entire state of California, really. So a lot of the people are critical of the fact that, Donald Trump has been found guilty, but this, at least for the time being, appears to have had no impact on the elections itself. But we have found at least one or two voices where people are critical of these charges, and they do believe pretty much everything Trump has been saying about the court case. Take a listen.
Well, I felt like he was guilty from the beginning, so I'm really happy to see that justice's been made. I mean, I hope that it's making a difference for the voters that are undecided. I don't think we should put a precedent that's been convicted of a felony back in the White House.
I'm glad that he was found guilty on some things, although I am surprised that it took this long. And I'm also surprised that he's still in the running election and that hasn't been brought up at all.
The first president that's been elected of a criminal offense. And how criminal is that? He certainly didn't kill anybody, but I don't know. I thought it was rushed, because juries sometimes debate long times because one person would see it a different way. But they found it awfully quick, I thought.
Well, these reactions are very symbolic of what the majority of the American people will tell you. Those who love Trump, they will tell you, yes, we knew this all along, he's guilty, so he shouldn't be, he shouldn't be running. And those who loved him all along will tell you, no, this is just, rigged and politically motivated. But it is important to note that there is a minority of American voters who are undecided. And some of the early polls, although it's important to note these are early polls and the numbers are not clear just yet, but those undecided voters could actually be swayed by the outcome of this verdict. And that's what's going to be very interesting to watch, especially in states like Arizona, where he was at a campaign rally today, a state that President Joe Biden actually won in the previous elections, but by just a margin. So it seems that those particular races in a handful of states will be decided by those undecided voters, and that could really decide the fate of these elections. Zhao Yang?
Thank you so much, Edith Tianshan in Los Angeles for us. It has taken more than a year for Donald Trump to be convicted, and that's since he was indicted in March 2023 on New York state charges related to a hush money payment. So let's take a look back at how the trial unfolded.
After weeks of dramatic testimony in New York, a jury found Donald Trump guilty of falsifying business records. Attack and delay. Commentators say that was Trump's tactic to prolong the pre-trial proceedings. He targeted prosecutors and the judge, while his lawyers tried to dismiss and defer the trial. No more delays. Manhattan Judge Juan Merchan ruled in early April this year. The first challenge was jury selection. The questioning of jurors took 4 days. A full 12-person jury along with 6 alternates was set on April 19. They vowed to make a fair decision over the case. At the same time, Donald Trump continued protesting his innocence, denouncing the trial as political and rigged. Despite a gag order, he took to social media to attack the judge and the New York district attorney, among others.
And this is really a concerted witch hunt, very simple. This is election interference, that's all it is, election interference.
The prosecution's first witness in the trial was a tabloid publisher named David Pecker. He helped broker the deal with adult film star Stormy Daniels and arranged to catch and kill a story about an affair between Trump and Karen McDougal, another woman alleged to have been paid hush money Packer also testified that then-Trump lawyer Michael Cohen was the go-between for the former president. Other witnesses included Rona Gruff, Trump's former longtime assistant, who admitted a link between the Trump Organization and Stormy Daniels. Stormy Daniels also took the stand, while Karen McDougal chose not to attend. Michael Cohen appeared in the courtroom as the key witness. His testimony lasted for 17 hours over 4 days. He tied Trump to the Daniels hush money payment. The judge allowed prosecutors to question Donald Trump, but the former president refused to take the stand. After 9 hours of deliberating, the jury's verdict was announced.
Donald J. Trump is guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree.
Wang Haiyang, CGTN.
And now let's talk to our guests. We have Einar Tangen here in the studio with us, Joseph Gregory Mahoney in Shanghai, and Jaden Horan in Miami. Gentlemen, once again, thank you for joining us. And I just want to say, please jump in anytime during our discussion. Feel free to just jump on in. Mr. Tangen, if we can start with you. So Donald Trump, he's defiant. He's calling this guilty verdict politically motivated. His supporters saying the same. Do you think this is the case? Is there any truth in this?
No, I mean, there's always politics, but the fact is, it's like somebody who cheats on their taxes and says, oh, it's politically motivated because you came after me and not everyone else who does it. The fact is, Trump, the jury believed that he did, in fact, sleep with Stormy Daniels, and the testimony that they really concentrated on, the first part, was this conversation that Packard had, where he was talking about catch and kill and the role that Cohen played in it. So, yeah, he's guilty. The problem he has from a legal point of view is they're not going to dismiss the charges at the appellate level. All they can hope for is that he gets a new trial. Unfortunately for Trump, he doesn't really have, unless he takes a stand, he has no one to say it didn't happen. As the testimony revealed, he said he never met Stormy Daniels, wouldn't know who she was. But then on the other hand, it was admitted that he had interviewed her for a position on his television show, and that she was in fact in his contact database.
Now, Professor Mahoney, Trump and his supporters, they've been citing elements like the gag order that was placed on Trump, the judge and the jury who are Democratic leaning, as saying that the trial was not fair. What do you think? That's to Professor Mahoney.
Well, I think it was a fair trial. In the case of the law was rather clear. The ample evidence presented by the prosecution was convincing to a jury of his peers, beyond a reasonable doubt that he was guilty on 34 counts. And among the legal experts who attended the trial from start to finish, many described the judge as offering a master class in impartiality. Now, as Einar said, the legal system is not completely immune to politics. And in fact, the prosecutor in this case, Alvin Bragg, was elected by the people of New York County, and he had discretion. He could choose whether or not to bring these charges. But the fact of the matter is, Republicans favor having local prosecutorial power. They favor states and local levels being able to have their own set of laws and abilities to apply them. So in this sense, the trial was not only fair, the outcome was not only fair, but politically speaking, as a Republican, Trump got what he deserved.
Well, Trump's saying, it's impossible to find a fair judge in the city of New York. Mr. Horan, if we can bring you into this, how influential is the location of the court trial on the outcome? Mr. Horan, if we can bring you into this conversation here, so how influential do you think the location of the court trial, the jury makeup, the court judge is on the outcome of the trial?
I think it's incredibly influential. I think what we can see here in Manhattan is that Manhattan is overwhelmingly Democratic. In fact, this precinct was something like 7% for the former president. So, when we talk about venue, we talk about fairness, we have to understand the political implications of utilizing the justice system when we're dealing with politicians. And I think, very unlike what your previous guest said, there might be room, here for an appeal relating to a biased jury pool, to the venue being one that did not give true impartiality. Certainly in the United States, we know that judges can err, and we know that juries have been overturned. But I really think in this case, when we look at it, the political implications, because that's really the most important thing from this case, are really negligible. The quick polls that did come out, as your correspondent pointed out to, for those independent voters show almost no move or moves within the margin of error. So in fact, Trump has been able to raise $50-some million and 200-some million across the affiliate campaigns off of this. And Democrats have a great talking point that they're running against a convicted felon. But really, it hasn't moved the needle with the American electorate at all.
Well, let's take a look at what Americans think about Trump's guilty verdict now. A poll conducted by ABC News and Ipsos finds half of Americans think that Trump's guilty verdict was correct. About 49% think that he should end his 2024 presidential campaign over the results. 47% of Americans say that they think the charges against Donald Trump in this case were politically motivated, whilst 38% say that they were not. 51% think that Donald Trump intentionally did something illegal in this case, whilst 12% think that Trump did something wrong, but not intentionally. Well, Einar, what do you think of these polls? Do they reflect true public opinion in the US? I mean, they're pretty much split down the middle, some of these opinions.
Well, they do, but let's put some clarity on this. All right, Republicans are probably going to vote for Donald Trump, Democrats for Joe Biden. The real issue is independents. I would have been more interested in the poll had they taken it among independents and those who have not decided, determine how they think that they would vote. Now, regardless of what happens to Donald Trump, whether he's guilty or not, whether you cry politics, the U.S. is wounded. You have a situation where the democracy there is not working. You have two incredibly unpopular candidates who are vying for the most powerful position, not only in the U.S., but in the world. And it's being driven by fear and this sense of victimization. And you see that on both sides. You have Biden talking about the good old days when Americans could, work less and earn more, and then you have Trump talking about, restoring making America great again. These are visions that don't have anything to do with the reality of today. They have everything to do with looking backwards, and this is the problem. Why is it that American voters are so angry that they are giving in to these kind of narratives which are exploiting the past, not talking about the future?
And Professor Mahoney, we hear time and again how deeply polarizing U.S. politics is. Now, with this conviction, how much worse can things get?
Well, as Einar was saying, the political dysfunction in the United States, certainly it existed before Trump started running for president the first time. And it's also clear that he built his political brand on exploiting a lot of the anger and unhappiness associated in part with the systemic dysfunction that we've seen in American governance over the last 20 or 30 years. So it's not surprising, as one of the most polarizing figures in recent U.S. history, and perhaps even much longer, that he would be politicizing this trial, that he would be driving it forward as one of the polarizing wedges in his campaign. Now, again, we don't really expect it to move the needle much in terms of whether people vote Democratic or Republican, depending on their identity, although it may, of course, impact the independents. But what it does do, unfortunately, is it continues to erode confidence in the system, and above all, the legal system, which will further damage American prospects for recovery.
Well, speaking about confidence in the legal system, Mr. Horan, I've read comments, people calling it a low point in the US, and people who don't agree with this verdict tend to go down this path of attacking the legal system. Do you think it will significantly dent trust in the system?
I think it certainly increases voter cynicism about the use of the justice system as a political weapon. But at the same time, I tend to take an optimistic stance and believe that, writ large, the American people are looking at this, both Republicans and Democrats, and saying, we're not quite sure that this is something that we want to have moving forward. And so there's a renewed interest in kind of removing politics from the criminal justice system and returning it really to where it belongs, which is at the ballot box. And ultimately, you can see Democrats in their messaging.
Excuse me?
Actually
you said it shouldn't be a criminal matter, it should be at the ballot box? Are you kidding me? You have 40% of Americans saying that they think it's likely or extremely likely that there will be a revolution. How can you say that criminal matters should be decided at the ballot box?
Well, first of all, I'm here as a political analyst. We can get into the fact that the statute of limitations has passed for this particular piece of legislation, that it took extraordinary action on the part of the prosecutor who had previously denied to prosecute this case, to bring it forward. There are many things that we could discuss.
Yeah, we could discuss the fact that it was put on hiatus because he was in the presidency office. Where do you come up with this stuff? You're obviously not a lawyer.
They are, in fact, not talking about this. They are, in fact, saying on networks like MSNBC and CNN that when Joe Biden spoke to voters in Philadelphia, instead the networks were covering the Trump trial. And that's not helping Democrats. And Democrats at the state and local level are not running against Donald Trump.
Why is a criminal matter a political matter in your opinion? Why would you say something so outrageous?
And they gave Donald Trump airtime. So what they have decided is that the American people, who clearly have mostly already made their decisions, are going to do it at the ballot box.
I know. No idea what you're talking about.
Professor Mahoney, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
I think that I think that we can see already an example of the polarization and the challenges of people speaking in a reasonable way about something that's very inflaming. But I think it's just symptomatic of the politics that we see in the United States, and not just the United States. Polarization is a problem that we see in the UK, Australia, South Korea, Japan, other places. This is a global phenomenon, and unfortunately the US is in the vanguard of it.
All right, well, I do want to have a look at the legal matters here as well. So let's take a look at this report first before we continue this conversation. So the US Supreme Court is considering whether the former president should have immunity from conspiracy and obstruction charges related to the 2020 election because he was a sitting president at the time. And as Trump and the nation wait for what's likely to be a monumental ruling, some of the former president's other cases are catching a break. So here's Tony Waterman with the report.
Mr. President, what's your message to your supporters?
A major victory for Donald Trump. One of the criminal cases against him paused indefinitely. A Georgia appeals court halting proceedings in the election interference case as it considers whether Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis can remain on the case, or if she should be removed over a romantic relationship with another Georgia prosecutor. The delay all but guarantees the trial won't wrap up before the November election. Trump's classified documents trial also on hold. Federal Judge Eileen Cannon, who was appointed by the former president, unexpectedly changing the hearing schedule amid a slew of unresolved legal issues. She's already scrapped the trial's start date. In an interview with Fox News, which was later posted to Trump's Truth Social, the former president blasted the legal cases against him.
I say it about almost all of these cases that are brought against me. They are doing it for the purposes of hurting a political opponent of Biden and trying to get him to win. We're dealing against a system that is so corrupt. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. I did nothing wrong in any of these things.
A Manhattan jury thought otherwise, convicting the former president of 34 felony charges related to his hush money case last week. Now that the trial is over, Trump is hitting the campaign trail hard, hosting a group of black conservative students at Mar-a-Lago on Wednesday. Polls have shown him gaining traction among the historically Democratic voting bloc.
To a large extent because of what we've done with the colleges, black colleges and universities. I got them funded. When I was president, I got to know the heads of many of the black colleges and universities. And I got them long-term financing, more money than they ever thought possible, more than they wanted.
And this weekend, he'll be courting conservatives in Las Vegas. The race to be Trump's running mate is also heating up. According to reports, his team has sent vetting materials to at least 7 people, including Representative Byron Donalds, who on Wednesday walked back comments suggesting black Americans were better off under segregation.
I never said that. What I was talking about was specifically black families, and the point that black families being together is a great thing for the black community.
Trump says he'll announce his VP pick at the Republican National Convention, which is now just 6 weeks away. Until then, the former president will be trying to convince enough voters that he should be returned to the White House, even if he is now a convicted felon. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Austin, Texas.
I know. Can you explain the American legal system for us, for our international viewers, and what are some of the characteristics here and the advantages and disadvantages?
Okay. So the American justice system is based on the British justice system, and that's basically you have your laws and then you have judges who are create precedents. In this particular case, it's just a run-of-the-mill criminal action. What he was accused of was falsifying statements about his taxes. It was kind of the same way that in the end, they got the famous gangster who spent the rest of his life in prison. He complained that he says, "You didn't get me for anything except tax evasion." Well, in this particular case, this is what happens with criminal enterprises. They try to cover things up. Obviously, things you had Weisselberg, his #1 guy, the guy he always was on television with. He said is the man I trust the most in the world, who's been spending more and more time in jail because of the things that he's admitted to. He has so far been very loyal to Trump. He hasn't tried to tie it back to him. But the fact is, the legal system in America is when it comes down to a jury, you have juries who decide. And in this particular case, the facts were very clear to the jury. They believed that he did, in fact, sleep with Stormy Daniels. She had a lot of extra details, and that is going to be an issue on appeal. But they believed that, and they were concentrated not so much on Cohen's testimony, but in the end, the testimony of Packard, a friend of Trump's, a witness that Trump did, his defense counsel did not try to attack, saying that they had a catch and kill system. And, obviously the checks went to Cohen, and it was quite clear that this was part of a conspiracy, and that's the way the jury found it. Now, on appeal, as I said, the only thing he can hope for is that he gets a new trial. Unfortunately for Donald Trump, he doesn't really have any new things to add to it that would change a jury's opinion. They're still going to look at the witnesses and the documents, and unfortunately, those are against him.
And Professor Mahoney, what do you think how the advantages and also some of the vulnerabilities of the American legal system are reflected in this particular case with Trump?
Trump has alleged that both the political and the legal systems are rigged. And I think one of the ironies of this is that, of course, he won his first election because Republicans effectively rigged the Electoral College so that you could win the presidency without winning the popular vote. And he benefited from that when he ran against Hillary Clinton, who got more popular votes than he did. Secondly, a lot of American people believe that the legal system is rigged against them, that it favors people who are rich and powerful. And certainly, if Trump is able to get this overturned, it will be on a technicality and on high-powered legal representation. But finally, this idea that the system is rigged, that the New York prosecutor was able to come after him in an unfair way, or the judge was unfair, and yet we have a judge that he appointed deciding not to move forward at this time with the classified documents trial. That argument works both ways, and so in this case, he appears to be benefiting from a system that he himself has rigged.
All right, well, let's take a look at this reaction from U.S. President Joe Biden. Now, he has criticized Donald Trump for claiming that the country's justice system is rigged. He called Trump's statement dangerous and irresponsible.
Our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years, and it literally is the cornerstone of America.
Biden said at the White House in his first remarks since the trial verdict that the U.S. justice system should be respected and should never be torn down. And meanwhile, Donald Trump criticized the judge in his trial and continued to undermine New York's criminal justice system as he tried to repackage his conviction on 34 felony charges as fuel to his latest White House bid.
When the government wanted something, they got everything. They got everything they wanted. It was a rigged trial. We wanted a venue change where we could have a fair trial. We didn't get it. We wanted a judge change. We wanted a judge that wasn't conflicted. And obviously he didn't do that. Nobody's ever seen anything like it.
We've got an interesting situation happening in the United States. I mean, there's Donald Trump's trial and President Biden's family also in legal trouble at the moment. His son Hunter on trial for gun charges. And, you know, hearing President Biden saying no one is above the law. Mr. Horan, I mean, this is quite an unprecedented situation. Or what's happening here? What's your take?
Yeah, I think it's ironic, that President Biden did say that because it's exactly what the prosecutors opened with in that case. And I think it's important to note that both political parties and both candidates at this point have criticized the justice system in the United States when it was convenient. Joe Biden says that it's 250 years old and that we need to trust it, that we need to not tear it down, but yet he denigrated it and called it filled with systemic racism, that black men and black women could not get a fair trial in the United States. He actually brought that up not that long ago at Morehouse College. Donald Trump himself in the riots of 2020, of course, said that the justice system and cops should be respected. So, there's egg on both of their faces. What I think is most interesting about this cycle is that it mirrors 2016, when once again the Justice Department is involved in investigations and or prosecutions of both political parties' candidates. And, A.G. Garland was on the Hill earlier this week to kind of dispel the notion that the Justice Department was involved in politics, but it's now central to what's going to go on in November's election. And unfortunately for both Biden and Trump, really on the margins, this does nothing but create a lot of fodder and a lot of campaign material and a lot of embarrassment, and also embarrassment for the American people.
Einar, do you think that's fair to say that, these politicians, saying that criticizing the legal system when it's convenient, or is there something perhaps fundamentally wrong here, or is the system, vulnerable to manipulation?
Well, I was both a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and I can tell you that the system is not perfect. No system is. The issue is, do you have a nation of laws, or do you have a nation where things are decided at the ballot box? And I would go towards the former. You have to have some sort of certainty. This idea that people are above the law, whether it's Biden's family or Donald Trump, is ridiculous. You have to have laws. Otherwise, what's the point? Why should anybody obey the law if it's just a question of how much money you have? This issue came up in regards to O.J. Simpson. People have to have faith. You have to get away from I'm a victim kind of mentality that has dominated the U.S. Everybody is a victim. Yet here it's the most powerful, wealthiest country on earth. And yet, 60% of the people, and Donald Trump in particular, says, no, we've been victimized. Everyone's unfair to us. I don't think many people around the world who are watching this from outside the U.S. feel that anybody in the U.S. is a victim.
So, that's something that Donald Trump has been saying as well, that, the true verdict will come in November with the vote itself. So it's interesting to see how he still has, very massive support in the U.S. Professor Mahoney, why do you think it is that a lot of Trump supporters seem to be kind of insensitized to this guilty verdict?
Well, a lot of people do fall into this narrative that there is a conspiracy theory, that there's a deep state. He, as I said earlier, he built his political brand on exploiting voter frustration and doing so among people who have been victimized. There are people in a lot of parts of the United States that have been victimized, but also he's built his political brand on victimizing others by targeting migrants, by targeting Chinese people who come to the United States for business or academic exchange, so forth and so on. So this is something that a lot of people are seeing as kind of a comeuppance. But on the other hand, his bellwether supporters, they've heard all these stories before. They've long been prepared. And in some ways, they see, the conviction as validation of his argument that the system is rigged against him. So in some ways, it's actually reinforcing their support for him. But I do think the numbers that we saw earlier, where somewhere around 50% of the American people believe that he was fairly convicted, I think that indicates a real danger for him with regard to the independents. Now, that doesn't mean that the independents will necessarily vote for Biden. They may choose not to vote at all or to vote for a third-party candidate. So it's not clear that it would change the outcome of the election. But I think on the whole, it hurts Trump at the end.
Mr. Horan, can you explain to us, give us an overview of some of the traditional support demographics for both Trump and for Biden, and how the Trump's verdict, as well as what's going on with Hunter Biden at the moment, how this could change things, shake things up, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, what I think is very interesting is that the coalitions that were built by Joe Biden, which was kind of a rebuilding of the Barack Obama coalition of minority voters plus educated whites, suburbanites, and urban dwellers, and the Donald Trump coalition, which was enormous amount of rural voters of all races, and then a surplus of white men, and truly. He split the difference in 2016 with suburbanites in general. And that's why he won in 2016. And now we have a clash between two coalitions that are both in motion. And when I say that is very interesting, that both of these cases could impact those coalitions. We know that Republicans, and specifically Trump in general, is doing much better with African-American men. We know that he is polling significantly higher with Hispanics, both women and men of all ages, but especially younger ones. And that may have to do with the fact that he has taken this mantle of being a victim. And that's something that many of minority voters in the United States identify with and understand that they have been disadvantaged. And for whatever reason, and this is kind of something we see across the Western world in general, but for whatever reason, they see something in Donald Trump that they are moving towards him. Now, the Hunter Biden case, what we may in fact see is movement of suburbanites away from Donald Trump that have already moved away, and instead not moving towards Biden, or finding that the Biden family or Biden himself, and not liking the reaction, could instead go to a third-party candidate. And that is where the real danger, I think, lies for the Democrats. And I think they understand that. The messaging out of the Democratic Party and the messaging out of the Republican Party, one is focusing on the conviction of the previous president, and that is the Republican Party. And the other is avoiding the prosecution and talking about it at all when it's relating to Hunter. And I think it's coming from the information they're getting from their internal polling.
I know a lot of analysts say that American voters are essentially voting with their wallets here, and how it's mostly economic concerns. Do you think this is what's playing a part now in how voters are viewing this Trump verdict, and how this could influence the presidential election?
Absolutely. I mean, if you start looking at younger minority voters, as my colleague was talking about, a lot of them are concerned about immigration issues. What they don't want is more competition during a period when, despite the, quote, big job numbers, good jobs are very hard to find. So yes, it is going to come down to unfortunately, how much money is in voters' pockets. And right now, 60% of Americans do not believe that they're better off today than they were 4 years ago. And that is going to resound to the polls, whether they vote for Donald Trump or just sit on their hands. I do forecast that, barring anything, Trump will be in the White House simply because of that.
All right, and Professor Mahoney, just one last question. Your thoughts on the other kind of consequences that might lie ahead following this conviction for Trump?
You know, as we've already said, I don't think we're going to see it moving the needle much in terms of their overall support. And again, the real concern is that you know, that the rest of the world is looking at this, and a lot of Americans are looking at their system as a whole. There's a lot of frustration, not just with the fact that they have to choose these two candidates, but I think there's this pervasive fear that there's something broken in the American political system, in the legislative system, in the judicial system, and that these voting for one candidate or the other, it's not fixing the problem, but in some way making the problem worse. And certainly, as we see politicization over whether it's Hunter Biden or Donald Trump, it further erodes confidence in the American future.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today and discussing this. You know, there's a lot more to discuss in this, but we will leave this for now. And as Einar pointed out earlier, this is the case that keeps on giving. Well, thank you so much. We have Professor Joseph Gregory Mahoney with us with East China Normal University, joining us from Shanghai, Jaden Horan from Miami, and Einar Tangen, Senior Fellow with the Teichler Institute here in the studio. Thank you. Now, as Trump works on capitalizing on his conviction, all eyes are on whether the former U.S. president will end up once again in the Oval Office or behind bars, where CGTN will be keeping an eye on the coverage and bringing you updates and more in-depth discussion as the story unfolds. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jia Yang.